Hello and welcome to Ron's Amazing Stories. And more importantly, the 2021 Christmas special. Today we find Ron working diligently in front of the home of Sylvia Schultz shoveling snow. He had lost a bet and was working hard to pay it off, lest he face the wrath of miser Sylvia. We join Ron as he works.
Ron, you're early for our recording. What's today?
What?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it.
Walker?
No, I'm in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
What's half a crown?
About 25 cents.
Ron was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger, who could have got a shot off half so fast.
We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Schultz is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and The Spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. I'm here, Sylvia. Was it 5 minutes?
You made it in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. You get your half a crown.
All right. And do I get to keep it all for myself, or does my good friend here carrying this huge turkey do I have to share it with him? Does he get his own half a crown?
Absolutely, yes. Everybody gets half a crown.
Does she get a half a crown? And she get a half a crown? And she get a half a crown? And she get a half a crown? Oh, that was fun. For those who don't know, that most of the dialogue from that skit that you just heard a minute ago was from the actual printing of A Christmas Carol.
Yes, it was. That's the original.
The very first one. And in fact, that would have been about 1843, if I'm right. Am I right about that, Sylvia?
Yes. Written in October 1843.
Well, give us some background. Tell us more about The Christmas Carol.
Sure thing. Well, so Charles Dickens, of course, was the author of A Christmas Carol, and in October 1843, Dickens was really hurting for money. He had gotten married in 1836, and he already had 4 kids, and number 5 was on the way.
Wow.
Yeah, so he had plenty of mouths to feed. And Dickens had a pathological horror of being in debt. When he was 12 years old, his father was thrown into debtor's prison, and Dickens had to go out and help support his family at such a young age, and it made a lasting impression on him. He never ever forgot that. He never ever wanted to go back to that situation. So Dickens had the idea for the story of a Christmas story of a miserly old curmudgeon whose grumpy outlook on life is changed by visits from ghosts. Now, when he wrote this, Dickens was actually recycling material that he had already written. He'd written a book called The Pickwick Papers.
Oh, yes.
And in that book, there's a story called The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton. The story was the story of Gabriel Grubb, and isn't just the perfect name for a grave digger, Gabriel Grubb. And this guy is a drunken sexton who chooses to spend Christmas Eve digging a grave instead of kicking back and celebrating the holiday. And someone's got to do this sort of thing, but Christmas is Christmas. You got to take a day off every once in a while. So during this digging of the grave, Grubb is dragged off by goblins, and the Goblin King shows him a series of visions that prove to him that life is worth living after all, and he has a change of heart. Sounds awfully familiar, right?
Yes, it does.
So Dickens took this basic theme and he embroidered it. So instead of visions, Ebenezer Scrooge received actual visits from ghosts. First, his late partner, Jacob Marley, and then the spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. And while he was writing this, for good measure, Dickens tossed in a ridiculously sentimental subplot involving Tiny Tim Cratchit. And, if he doesn't change his ways, Tiny Tim is going to die and the Cratchit family is going to be bereft. And it was the kind of sickly poor child that the Victorians loved to weep over. So the Victorians just ate this up. And he came up with this idea and he put pen to paper and he just tossed it off in this feverish work. And it was on his publisher's desk in less than 6 weeks.
Wow.
Dickens wrote this story in a fever of production and just cranked it out. And surprisingly enough, that gamble of his paid off. A Christmas Carol was released on December 19th, 1843. The original print run of 6,000 copies sold out within 3 days, and it has never been out of print since.
That's amazing.
And he wrote this story to make money, and he did what he set out to do. He paid off that debt that he was so worried about, and that the sales from the royalties from A Christmas Carol set him up for life. And when he passed, he was able to leave both his wife, from whom he had separated in 1858, and his mistress, an actress he made in 1857, independently wealthy for the rest of their lives, too.
So, Sylvia, is it true that Charles Dickens, when he wrote the thing, there was some sort of, we'll call it plagiarism of this story, that there were some illicit copies that really drove the cost down and actually caused him some momentarily monetary delay? Is that true?
That is true. And, that's the fear of every author out there, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, we think this is a danger of the internet, but you know what? It happened to Charles Dickens too.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't feel so bad now. But it was immensely popular.
And so people just plagiarized it and printed it their own selves, and it really drove down the cost and his profit from that. So what did he do about that?
Well, Ron, you can read a story by Charles Dickens, and it might possibly could have been printed by somebody else. But if you attended a spoken recitation of A Christmas Carol, you can be sure that you're getting the real deal. Charles Dickens performed A Christmas Carol on stage as a one-man show 127 times over the course of his career. And he toured the United States, giving readings of his works, other works besides A Christmas Carol. But that was by far the most popular. So he did go on tour in his home country and in the United States. And in 1867 and 1868, during this United States tour, he stayed at the Omni Parker House Hotel, home of the Parker House Roll, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Yes. So guests at the hotel could hear him in his room practicing his delivery late at night. And he used to stand in front of this big mirror that was hanging in his room and declaim his oration and practice for when he was on stage. And that was back in 1867 and 1868. And Dickens apparently is still frequenting the Omni Parker House Hotel. That mirror is haunted.
I was waiting for you to get to a ghost story.
Yes. Modern guests who have stayed in what's called, of course, the Dickens Suite can sometimes experience the ghost of Charles Dickens. He appears in the mirror, pacing back and forth, reading A Christmas Carol out loud.
That's
but if somebody comes up to the mirror, he vanishes. So, yeah. And also, there's another ghost story attached to the hotel and Dickens. Hotel guests also report that the elevator would stop on the third floor even though no one had pressed the third floor button. And they think that that is the ghost of Charles Dickens heading back to his room.
So, was there an elevator there in 1868?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
The things you learn. That's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, I hear spookiness going on.
Yeah. Somebody's
what is
interrupting
happening?
us. What's going on here?
Well, who is it? Who dares to interrupt our
Sylvia,
recording?
are you seeing what I'm seeing here?
Oh, are you talking about that misty shape forming over in the corner?
Sylvia, I know what this is.
What is it?
That is the ghost of Christmas past, and he interrupted your dissertation to do something. Do we kick him out or do we listen to what he has to say?
Oh, I don't ever kick ghosts out. You know me better than that.
He seems to be holding some sort of parchment.
Oh, okay. Well, let's hear what he has to say.
All right. I'm taking the parchment here. It appears to be a ghost story of some sort.
Excellent.
Dare I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it says here that it is a story from Christmas past. Monte Cristo is an elegant Victorian mansion that sits in the town of Junee, Australia. It was considered the height of elegance and opulence in the 1800s. As the family home of the town founders, it was once the site of fancy dances, parties, and many Christmas traditions. The house was built in 1884 by Christopher Crawley, and those that lived there over the years have reported seeing mysterious lights, hearing footsteps from the upper floors, and capturing eerie images in photographs. Who is haunting this old homestead? Locals tell the tale of a young maid who died after falling from a balcony. Or was she pushed by the man that wanted to hide the fact that he was the father of her unborn child? Witnesses claim to see her walking the stairs where she died each and every Christmas. Then there's the stable boys whose mattress he set on fire Christmas Eve to help keep him warm. The horses apparently whine when he is present. And finally, there's Crawley's youngest child, Magdalena. Her image has been captured in photographs, giving rise to the story that she is still haunting the house where she died. She too passed from a mysterious fall on Christmas Eve, and it has been suggested that her nanny dropped her on purpose. Mrs. Crawley has remained there too. Visitors say that the sensation of Christmas snow falling indicates her spirit is present. The Crawley family remained in residence until 1938, about the same time A Christmas Carol was a new tradition here in the United States. The house then stood empty under the care of several caretakers until 1963, when it was purchased by Reg and Olive Ryan, who restored it. The homestead today operates as a museum and antique showcase. Gee, I don't know if that was worth an interruption or not, Sylvia.
Every ghost story is worth it.
So, Sylvia, I know that you're a librarian.
I am indeed.
And I'm guessing that you can answer a question that I have had for a very long time.
Well, I'll try my best.
Well, so here's the deal. A Christmas Carol, we know, is a fantastic story. And you gave us some of the history, some of it you kind of peeked at. But why in the heck were the people of the Victorian era so dang interested in ghosts, even more so than we are today? We're pretty indoctrinated right now.
Yeah, the Victorians really give us a run for our money. You know, if ghost hunting shows like Taps and Ghost Adventures were on the Victorian radar, boy, they would have just been eating that up. Yeah. The Victorians were very interested in ghosts. There were several huge wars going on. There was the Crimean War. There was the American Civil War. People were really interested in spiritualism because they were losing a lot of loved ones. And it was a kind of a bleak time in history. And to be fair, the Christmas season is a very bleak time of year. You've got very little daylight. You've got long hours of darkness. And that just gives more time for whatever goes bump in the night to wander around. It's just dark and spooky outside and gloomy. And yeah, it's the perfect time to huddle indoors by a fire and tell ghost stories. Now, the Victorian era was really primed for experiencing ghost stories and telling ghost stories. And I'll explain what I mean. People of the early 19th century were just getting used to the luxury of having dependable sources of light after nightfall. Gaslighting was invented in the 1790s, and gaslighting of the streets was pretty common by the early 1800s. Most streets in London were lit by street lamps by 1816.
I see where this is going.
Yeah. Having gas lights in the streets was fine. I mean, that was outdoors. It was cool. But gas in homes as a way of lighting one's own home was really distrusted for the first 50 years or so. People are like, okay, so you're telling me you want to run natural gas into my house and then I'm going to turn a switch and set it on fire and that's going to be the light in my room? Yeah, no, not so much. And the gas company is like, no, really, it's fine. And people are still really a little leery of this. And they were right to be leery of it because this technology was pretty darn good for the time, but it wasn't perfect. And there's a theory in paranormal circles that gas fixtures themselves
this is what I thought.
may have contributed to the epidemic of Victorian ghost sightings.
Not enough oxygen in the house.
Exactly. These fixtures leaked noxious gases into the air. And we think of Victorian women in tight corsets, and that's not the only reason they could not get enough air. Because of these noxious fumes, there's this gaslit parlor, there's not a whole lot of oxygen available. So yeah, that's the theory, is that these slowly seeping fumes were inhaled and ingested, well, not ingested, but inhaled by the Victorians, and they actually led to hallucinations of wispy figures or shadows seen out of the corner of the eye. I mean, fully a third of the ghost stories you hear take place in Victorian times.
Yeah, that's
the Victorian for sure. It's just crawling with ghosts.
Well, and I'd also like to point out at this time that in modern times we have added a smell to natural gas so that you know that it's present.
That's true. That is absolutely true. Yeah, and the Victorians did not have that. So they had no idea.
Yeah, so it didn't smell like rotten eggs in the 1860s.
No, it didn't. I don't think it smelled like much of anything at all. So yeah, they had no idea that they were slowly being gassed. They were slowly being compromised by this noxious gas.
I think that is a wonderful explanation as to why they became so interested in ghosts.
Yeah. Well, the Victorians were weird anyway.
Yes, they were.
The Victorian Christmas, I mean, now we look back 150 years and we think of Currier and Ives prints and a sleigh going through snow and Christmas trees with candles on them and everything and gingerbread men. And the Victorian Christmas was not like this.
No.
Victorian Christmas was more like a mashup of Halloween, New Year's Eve, and Mardi Gras. They really cut loose.
I heard it as described rowdy.
Rowdy is a very good word for a Victorian Christmas celebration. Yes, when Dickens was writing about the celebrations that Scrooge was witnessing, even though he was invisible. Yeah, it's crazy games. It's tearing loose. It's going out and singing carols, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, these party games were just out of hand. There were games like Snapdragon. Snapdragon is where you fill a bowl with raisins and candied chestnuts, and then you pour brandy over the whole thing and you light it on fire.
That sounds safe.
And the idea is to reach into this bowl of fire and grab a flaming raisin and pop it into your mouth.
Yeah.
To extinguish it.
Yeah, I want to play. Let's do you have a bowl?
Well, I can scare up a bottle of brandy, I'm sure. There's also a game called Hot Cockles, which is the person who is it kneels on the floor with their head in somebody's lap and put their hand behind them, and everybody else trots past and slaps the person's hand, and you try to guess who's hitting your hand. I'm not kidding. This is really a thing at Victorian Christmas parties. And then they had another game that was, this is where the Halloween games come in. The game was you had to take a bite out of an apple that was tied to one end of a stick. And on the other end of the stick, there was a lit candle.
Huh.
Like, yeah, that sounds safe. I mean, the phrase "don't try this at home, kids" had not been invented yet.
No, they didn't have that one, did they?
No.
Huh.
And it wasn't only the Christmas parties that really got out of hand. There was a tradition called wassailing, which is going out and singing Christmas carols.
Right.
But the thing about Victorian Christmas carols is that these carolers that went from house to house were not content with a styrofoam cup of hot chocolate and a cookie or three. We sing the Christmas carol, "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," and we sing these lyrics. Now bring us a figgy pudding and bring it right here. We won't go until we get some. So bring it right here. They weren't kidding about this. These groups of rowdy young men, there's that word again, rowdy, would go around to well-to-do houses and they would kind of barge in and rub mud on the carpets and grind cookie crumbs into the doilies, and they would demand gifts of food and fine wine and claret and cakes. And they'd just hang out for half an hour or so making a ruckus, and then they'd move on to the next place.
And we won't go until we get some.
Yes. And, you might tip your newspaper carrier or your hairdresser at Christmas or your postal carrier and you not think anything of it. But tips at Christmas during the Victorian era and even beyond, even before that, were a very serious matter. It's one thing if you don't tip your paper carrier and he throws your paper into the bushes instead of on your front porch. But if you hire bodyguards to watch your house, if you're well-to-do, and you don't tip those bodyguards, so they either slack off for the night or invite their friends to come and rob you, that's an entirely different matter. And this goes back to 1419.
Wow.
In England, there was the city of London in that year ordered servants to stop demanding Christmas offerings and threatening violence if refused. This was really a serious problem from the medieval times all the way up into the Victorian era. It scaled back a little because of one poem. In 1822, there was a fellow named Clement C. Moore who wrote a poem called A Visit from St. Nicholas. And we know it now as A Night Before Christmas. So he wrote this poem, and in doing so, he turned this situation of wassailing 180 degrees. So the leader of these group of thugs was called the Lord of Misrule. Now, the character of St. Nicholas, who comes into the house in A Visit from St. Nicholas, is the polar opposite of this Lord of Misrule. Instead of a bunch of rowdy young men, you have one guy. He still hasn't been invited in, but he comes in silently. He doesn't make a huge ruckus. He doesn't call out. He doesn't yell. He doesn't barge in. He just comes in really quietly. So Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, is obviously a member of a lower working class. He has a peddler's pack on his back, and he carries the stump of a pipe in his teeth. Now, this is interesting because dandies would you've got this picture in your mind of somebody smoking a clay pipe, and it's got a really long stem. And that was an affectation of gentlemen, of dandies. Working men wanted to enjoy their pipes too, but they couldn't afford to just sit around holding this pipe. So they'd snap that clay stem off and just smoke a little bitty thing that they didn't have to hold. They could just clench it in their teeth. Yeah. So also St. Nicholas makes sure the narrator knows he is not a threat. His appearance is startling. Yes. The narrator is not expecting someone to come down the chimney, but he lays his fingers at the side of his nose, and he lets the narrator know that he has nothing to fear. He is absolutely non-threatening. And instead of demanding gifts, St. Nicholas leaves gifts. So a complete turnaround.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was about at this time, interestingly enough, that people started buying Christmas presents for each other and for their children instead of just making them. So this meant that more people were frequenting shops to buy Christmas presents. And the shopkeepers wanted their shops to be clean, inviting, non-violent places.
Safe.
Yeah. So this tradition of gangs of thugs roaming the streets and barging into people's houses had been taken for granted for centuries. But now, with this Visit from St. Nicholas poem, it became frowned upon. Society started moving away from that tradition and embracing a different tradition, which I think is just fascinating. They wanted to keep the drunken revelers out of the shops so that people could do their Christmas shopping in peace. So instead of writing up these reports of these drunken gangs of hoodlums in the paper, they got moved to the back of the paper in the police blotter. Quite literally marginalized. So that behavior became frowned upon, and eventually it did die out.
And we started seeing the Christmas that we have today.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, when Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, and Scrooge is asked for a donation.
Yes.
And he says, what? Aren't there any poorhouses? What happened to the poorhouses? People didn't really do much in the way of charity around the Christmas season before Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. And with that example, collecting for charity at Christmas started becoming more popular. And it was Dickens' story which led to that.
That's incredible. So I had no idea. You know,
super cool.
You think about how they say that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
And here you have a prime example of just that.
Exactly.
Where the pen took an entire society that was dead set on destruction and foul works and turning it on its side. That's incredible.
Yeah. Both of those. A Visit from St. Nicholas first in 1822. And then, Wassailers aren't going around asking for alms anymore. They're not taking charity into their own hands anymore. But in 1843, you've got people with kind hearts that start thinking to themselves, well, hey, you know what? Maybe we should take up a collection. Maybe we should be generous to those less fortunate around Christmas. And that was due to Dickens.
You know, when I was listening last week on the show, of course, we played A Christmas Carol. And when I was listening to that section where he was interacting with the person that was collecting alms.
Yeah.
You know, I always wondered, why in the world is this in the book? A lot of people probably think, oh, well, it was just because they wanted to show just how Scroogey he was. But there was more to it, wasn't there?
There was a little more to it. This was just starting to become a thing in Dickens's time. There were poorhouses, there were debtors' prisons, and there were a lot of people that had moved from the countryside into the cities.
Well, and didn't you mention that his father was put into debtor's prison?
Yes. Yes, he was.
So it makes all of that so much more important.
Right, yeah. Dickens had a heightened sense of what it meant to need charity. So he put that in his book. And it was so intensely popular that the idea of doing charitable works at Christmas really took off after that.
That's incredible. Thank you for that, Sylvia. That is truly fascinating stuff.
Sure thing.
That's great. Now, I know that you had a few stories that you wanted to share, some ghost stories, to solidify this as truly a Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's right.
Shall we go there?
Yes, it would not be a Ghost Stories with Sylvia without Ghost Stories from Sylvia.
Okay, Sylvia, so what do you have for us?
Well, I have a couple of stories for you. And what I decided to do for this time is the idea of ghosts being helpful to the living. We have Jacob Marley here, who really wants to help his friend Scrooge avoid the fate that he has submitted himself to.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, who are really honestly trying to help Scrooge become a better person.
And the ghost of Christmas past was just here a little while ago.
Right, yeah, and very graciously shared a story with us, which is amazing. The first one is called The Imaginary Friend. So there was a young boy of about 4 years old that started surprising his parents at breakfast with these wonderful, fantastical folk tales and fairy tales that he had picked up seemingly from his dreams overnight. He would tell these tales to his parents over the breakfast table. And the more diverse and clever these tales became, the more his parents got curious as to where he was picking these up. There were references to elves and dragons and things the boy really could not have been familiar with. And the parents kind of generally recognized these as old German folk tales, but not really Brothers Grimm, not really Grimm's fairy tales, but something almost predating Grimm. They were very archaic folk tales. So they realized that the kid was not sleeping normally. He was having really bizarre dreams. So the parents started listening outside his room to see, hopefully their kid's not having nightmares and night terrors and screaming, but he's sleeping peacefully. That's what they were hoping. But one night they're outside his room and they heard their young child's voice speaking, but they heard another voice as well. They heard a deep, melodious male voice speaking. And they realized that there was some strange guy in their son's room. So they turned on the light, rushed in the room, and only their son was in the room, sitting up in bed. And the kid said, "Don't do that. You make my friend go away. He wasn't done with his story." So the parents are like, "Okay, this is weird, but let's go with it. Let's ride it out as long as we can. No harm's being done. Somebody's just telling our child stories." So this went on for about a year or so. So when the boy was about 5 years old, the boy came into his parents' room in the middle of the night and told them that a fire was starting in the apartments in back of theirs. His friend had told him that if the fire was allowed to burn unchecked, it would kill the two young women who were living in the upstairs apartment.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. And the parents were suspecting that this was another one of his fairy tales, but the young boy insisted, this is really important, please, please, please call somebody. So the drowsy father checked on the building. He went through the building and discovered that there was a fire starting. So they put the fire out, saved the building, and saved the lives of the two women that were living in that apartment.
Huh.
So after this, the parents were naturally a lot more curious than about this boy's friend. So they were really eager to welcome this spirit or whatever it is back to their child's bedroom so that they could figure out what was going on. But after that night, after the night of the fire, the kid never told any more stories. He hadn't heard any more stories from the ghosts.
So he had done his job and had moved on?
He had done what he had come to do. Now, the story doesn't quite end there.
Oh, okay.
Years passed, and the whole situation became, a charming little anecdote from their son's childhood.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But the family moved, and some of their old neighbors came to visit them in their new place. And they were reminiscing about the old apartment place where they used to live. And the neighbors told them that an earlier resident of their apartment had been an old German fellow whose wife had died before him. He was so grief-stricken about losing his wife that he refused to care for himself or even eat. And he starved to death. He basically committed suicide because he just did not want to live anymore. And it is said that suicides or people who die from not taking care of themselves often have very strange afterlives. And this old German fellow may have been cursed to haunt his home until he did a good deed, liberating his spirit from the desperation of his own purgatory.
Which relates back to Marley.
Yeah. And since he saved these girls' lives, I think that qualifies as doing a good deed.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the story A Christmas Carol, Marley comes back and more or less says that the number of chains that he has to carry were based on the number of evil things or bad things that he had done, correct?
Yes, every chain that he was carrying had been forged by his own actions, and he did not want to see that happen to Scrooge.
And he said that if Scrooge were to pass, his load of chains would be 10 times worse than anything that he was carrying.
Yeah, that made my eyes widen. I'm like, whoa, this guy's loaded down with stuff, and Scrooge is 10 times worse.
And so the reason I bring that up is because it sounds like Dickens understood that at the time. And so it goes in very nicely with that story. Well, thank you for that story, Sylvia.
Sure thing.
Sylvia, did you hear that? Or am I just...
Oh, yeah. Well,
is that the Jingle Bell again?
I think it is.
Are we going to get the
I'm
second...
definitely hearing it, yeah.
Or we're going to get the second visit, aren't we?
We get another ghost, which maybe means another ghost story.
I'm sure it does, but this must be the ghost of Christmas Present?
Well, who else could it be?
All right, well, I don't see anything. Oh, there. Look there.
Oh, yes. Welcome.
And he's holding a parchment.
Sweet.
Okay, I'm going to take the parchment.
All righty. What's it say?
Sylvia, this is an email from one of our listeners.
Oh, fantastic.
And we have a story from listener Pauline Ingram, who just happens to live in Landports, Portsmouth, UK.
No way.
No, I'm totally serious. Do you know why that's significant?
I do. That is where Dickens was born.
Yes, it is. So what a coincidence. That's impossible.
That is truly amazing.
Well, she sent in this Christmas ghost story and has titled it The Ghost of Christmas Pests.
Okay.
Okay. That's what she titled it. I have no control over those things. All right. She says, and here's her story. My husband is a pest control technician, and he normally has to drive pretty far out into the woods to do his service. It was Christmas Eve, and he had only one job left before his day was done. His GPS took him to an old, abandoned Freemason building, which was supposed to be a firehouse. While he was slightly confused, he figured that it was the right address and started spraying for bugs. When he gets to the back of the building, he sees that the basement door is open. It's actually a converted coal chute that led under the house. He told me that he could hear what sounded like someone walking, so he hollered down that he was just a pest technician doing his job. The sounds stopped. Then he heard a violin begin to play. It was "O Holy Night" by Adolphe Adam, one of my husband's favorites. He was about to head down into the basement when he hears what he explained to me as a monotone voice saying, "Hey, I need some help." Taken aback, he replied saying, "Is everything okay? Are you hurt?" The voice just repeated, "I need help." He couldn't see down into the basement, and there weren't any apparent lights, so he grabbed the flashlight at his belt and started heading down the stairs. Then the music stopped, and screams followed. My husband is a 6'2", 250-pound man. People don't mess with him or even try to talk to him, and things do not scare him. But he knocked the bloody hell out of there. Her words, not mine. He said the entire time he walked back to his truck, it felt like something was right behind him. Not knowing what to do, he came home. His boss called him later that evening and apologized for giving him the wrong address. Pauline Ingram, Landport, Portsmouth. Thank you, Pauline. That is a Christmas story like none other.
Wow.
And it comes from our friends in the UK, which happens to be the birthplace of Charles Dickens.
So cool.
You can't make this stuff up, Sylvia.
No, you can't. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, that's a great story. I thought you'd love that one.
Oh, man, yeah.
All right, Sylvia, you have another story.
So this comes to us from Hollywood.
Ah.
This happened to Lamont Marvin, who is the father of actor Lee Marvin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he narrowly escaped death in World War II by paying heed to a vision. So it's not quite a ghost story, but it is somebody being helpful. So Marvin, a veteran of World War I, was 46 years old when the United States entered World War II. Since his two sons were serving in the armed forces, Lamont decided to enlist again. He was in Antwerp, Belgium, when his near miss with death occurred. It was 1944, and the Germans had just evacuated. As the Allies moved in to occupy the territory, the Nazis bombarded them with heavy artillery and V-2 rocket-propelled bombs. On this particular day, however, there had been a lull in the Blitzkrieg. Lamont happened to be walking the streets of downtown Antwerp when he came upon the Rex Theater and decided to take a few minutes to look at the pictures out front. He was looking at the movie posters and everything, and as he stood there, he heard an inner voice urging, "Hurry, hurry," but he ignored it. Then, as he continued to look at the posters, he suddenly saw the image of a telegram addressed to his wife superimposed over the movie poster. And he read the words, "We regret to inform you."
Oh, wow.
And Lamont did not stick around to read anymore. He was like, okay, this is really happening. He realized he was seeing a vision of either Lee or his other son, and he let out an anguished cry and ran blindly down the street. And he ran for a little while, and then he ducked into a concrete doorway just to catch his breath.
Oh.
And he stood there holding his arm over his eyes, just trying to recover from the shock that he had just had. And just at that moment, one of the V-2 rockets dropped squarely on top of the Rex Theater.
Oh, wow.
The blast of the explosion made Lamont's ears ring.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he was just, pain filled his ears. Slowly he turned his horrified gaze to behold the flaming Rex Theater disaster, where 567 people were killed and 291 wounded, many of whom died later from their injuries. The carnage was so terrible that the July 21st, 1945 Saturday Evening Post called it the war's worst V-weapon disaster. And according to that same article, 2 days after the bomb hit, many of the dead were still in their seats. The theater was like a grisly wax museum. And it was from this horror that Lamont Marvin had been saved. And Lee Marvin would tell this story. And he would say, Dad ignored that inner voice that first said, hurry, hurry. So his guardian angel, or whatever, had to give him a visual signal. When the image of the telegram materialized, he was actually seeing a notice of his own death. And he would have assuredly died if he had not run as fast as he did.
That's incredible.
So that happened December 16th, 1944. So it's another Christmas story.
Well, that, Sylvia, is an incredible way to end the story section of our podcast today. That is something. And Lee Marvin, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Lee Marvin, the Dirty Dozen.
Right.
Incredible. What a story.
Yeah. Really
Amazing.
Stunning.
Well, Sylvia, I think we've come to the section where we need to talk about the 12 Nightmares of Christmas.
Yes, my blog post.
Now, it's wrapping up, isn't it?
It is, yes. Well...
But it's not too late to go back and review all 12 days.
All 12 days in a row, and you can revisit them anytime you like. They're up on sylviaschultz.wordpress.com, and you can find stories of Christmas ghost stories, December ghost stories. You can find recipes. I talk about Saturnalia, and I give a really awesome recipe for a Roman pear pudding called patina de Pyrrhus, which I am actually going to make tonight.
Okay. I've heard of Saturnalia.
Yes.
Okay, and my association with that is, if I'm right, Rome?
Yes. Yes, I was a classics major and studied Roman history and Roman culture in college and still have a very deep fondness for it. So my husband and I are having a Saturnalia feast tonight, and I am...
Are you?
Yes. I'm making a pork roast, and I'm going to make a cherry sauce to go onto it. The Romans loved fruit sauces with their meat, and I'm going to make some Roman bread, and we're going to have hummus and cucumbers and, nuts and fruits and stuff like that, and apples. And for dessert, we're going to have this patina de Pyrrhus. Oh, and I'm also making a salad with tuna on it.
And wasn't this similar to the rowdy things that happened?
That's where it came from.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, this was an echoing back to the old Saturnalia celebrations because...
I thought so. Because, I've never made that connection until today.
Yeah.
But, because if I remember, it was kind of done for the slaves and for anybody that didn't have any stature whatsoever, right?
Exactly right, yeah. It was a day where everyone was equal, so the masters waited on the slaves.
And I've heard of that, and I've never studied Roman culture, but I've heard of that.
Yeah,
and it's just another Christmas thing, sort of.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so tell us again where we can go and view the last few days of a 12 Nightmares of Christmas.
That can be found at my blog.
Wait. Do you hear that?
Oh. More jingle bells.
I was thinking that the Ghost of Christmas Present wasn't or the ghost of Christmas is to come, excuse me,
Right.
hadn't made a visit. And right there, look,
That ghost has to put in an appearance, doesn't it?
biggest one too. Isn't that
Yeah.
a giant?
Oh, he is ginormous. My goodness, that's a little terrifying.
And he's holding this little, in his hand, it looks like a stamp.
But yeah, it's the parchment, same as the others.
Yeah, you go get that one.
Oh, okay, fine. I can't believe I'm doing this. All right, here it is. Okay,
Okay.
let's read it.
All right. I'll read it. Give it to me.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Well, it's addressed to the friends and listeners of Ron's Amazing Stories.
Oh, cool.
You want me to, should I read it?
Yes. Let's see what he has to say.
All right. Well, it says, to the amazing listeners of Ron's Amazing Stories, here are just a few things that you can expect from the podcast next year. This is all news to me.
Oh, boy.
Maybe
Well, what
not.
does it say? What does it say?
Okay. Well, it says that we are returning to our roots this coming year and will have more authors, storytellers, and other guests on the show to tell their stories in person.
Hey.
And it's been a long time since we've done that, where we've had authors come in. That's how we met.
Yes.
So we're going to be returning to that and doing more of that.
Fantastic.
Next year, we're going to open a phone number for you to call and leave your stories.
Oh, my.
Now, I've tried to make this work in the past, but I have finally found a workable solution that will be integrated to the website. And not only will you have a way to leave your stories, but you'll be able to log on and listen to them in real time.
Hot dog.
Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah.
There are a few little more logistic things I got to work out. I've got to upgrade the WordPress site to be a little more robust. But once I get that done, this is going to happen.
Wow.
Okay. And finally, we are expanding our content by including stories from history in a new segment called Our Amazing Stories.
Oh, boy.
It's going to be a lot of fun. In fact, the very first one that we'll be presenting are The Adventures of PT 109.
Oh,
Think
cool.
of John F. Kennedy here.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that, Sylvia?
That sounds nifty.
Yep. And that is all coming in 2022.
Oh, boy.
I'm excited. I'm excited, especially about the phone number for people to call in. I'm hoping that works well, and I hope you, the listeners, make use of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I've tried things and the listeners go, yeah, we're not going to do that.
Oh,
But I'm hoping that's something that you guys grab onto and start calling in your stories. And if it's a good enough quality recording, it'll make the podcast. So I'm just saying.
that is exciting.
Yep. Well, Sylvia, that is the Ghost of Christmas Present.
That's wonderful.
All right, so let's go back to my question, and that is, if they want to see the 12 Nightmares of Christmas, where do they go?
Well, people can visit www.sylviaschultz.wordpress.com, and you can read through the 12 Nightmares of Christmas, and it is actually the 5th year I've been doing this. So you can go back and visit previous Nightmares of Christmas if you are so inclined. And I still actually have calendars left. So if you want to order a calendar, you can do that there too.
And don't forget, she's got a brand new book out called The Days of the Dead. Did I get
Yes,
that right?
Days of the Dead. And the calendar, the 2022 calendar, is also the Days of the Dead calendar with 12 new stories. You just click the Contact Me button on the top of the site and contact me, and we'll get you set up with the calendar. Make every day spooky.
Well, I have been keeping that book close by, and I have been reading stories from it periodically, and I have yet to be disappointed by a story.
Thank you.
Good on you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Ron. That means a lot to me to hear you say that.
All right. Well, I think that we're going to pass this off now to the Ghosts of Christmas to be. And Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. I loved today's show.
I had an absolute blast, as always, and Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for listening, and God bless us, everyone.
And I will throw in my God blesses everyone as well. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks, Ron.
Ghost Stories with Sylvia was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. I always have a great time talking with Sylvia, and I learn all kinds of new stuff. If you want to visit her on her home turf, head to sylviaschultz.wordpress.com. There you will find her blog and access to the podcast Lights Out. I will have links available in the show notes. Thank you, Sylvia. Gladys Goodies treats are a 100% natural, nutrient-rich treat that pets love to eat. You can get your treats and some really cool swag for your dog and cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our very own promo code RONS. That's RONS. And you'll get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
Well, 56 is almost gone. Only 3 more days. We made a lot of friends, sold a lot of Chevrolet. But let's not wait till New Year's Eve. At some time past 11. Let's go explore what lies in store for 1957. May 57 bring you all that's best along the way. Good health, good friends, good times galore in your new Chevrolet. The big buy in the low-price field will win in any test. All point-by-point comparisons show Chevy leads the rest. May you enjoy the special air of springtime, clean and new. Enjoy it every bit as much inside your Chevy, too. The outside air can breeze right through this brand new intake vent, improving air supply as much as 22%. May friends add to your happiness, and may days be filled with fun, and may you often have a chance to choose your favorite one. In Chevrolet, you have a choice no other car can touch. 5 engines, 5 transmissions. Only Chevy has so much. And may you reap the harvest of the highways across the land. And when again the end of one more year is close at hand, and you count all the good things that you gained along the way, perhaps the best of all the rest will be your Chevrolet. And although our show is far from being over, on behalf of your authorized Chevrolet dealer, let me wish you a very happy New Year.
That was the Christmas special for 2021 and happened to be episode number 522. My heartfelt thanks to Sylvia Schultz for being part of all this, and my thanks to you for listening. I hope that your Christmas is blessed. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.